The Israel-Palestine conflict is rooted in a complex and tragic history. After the Holocaust, a movement arose to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, then under British control. This led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in 1948, creating a refugee crisis that continues to this day. Since then, wars and uprisings have defined the region, leaving deep scars on both sides. The 1967 war further complicated matters, with Israel occupying the West Bank and Gaza Strip. This occupation, now in its sixth decade, has fueled resentment and resistance, while Israel's expansion of settlements in the occupied territories is seen by many as illegal and a major obstacle to peace. The Palestinians, meanwhile, remain divided, with the West Bank governed by the Palestinian Authority and Gaza controlled by Hamas, a group designated as terrorist by Israel, the United States, and the European Union. This fraught history forms the backdrop against which the current crisis in Gaza unfolds. The enduring legacy of displacement, occupation, and violence creates a tinderbox prone to eruption, making the pursuit of a just and lasting peace all the more urgent. The conflict is not simply a territorial dispute, it is a human tragedy that has claimed countless lives and sown deep mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians. Understanding this history is crucial to grasping the gravity of the situation in Gaza today. Gaza, a densely populated coastal strip, is currently facing a dire humanitarian crisis. Years of Israeli blockade, coupled with repeated military operations, have crippled the economy and left the population in a state of perpetual vulnerability. Essential goods including food, medicine, and fuel are in critically short supply, leading to widespread malnutrition and disease. The United Nations has described Gaza as unlivable, with its infrastructure decimated and its people facing a daily struggle for survival. The blockade, imposed by Israel since 2007, severely restricts the movement of people and goods, strangling economic activity and trapping Gazans in a cycle of poverty. Hospitals are overwhelmed, lacking essential supplies and equipment, while the education system struggles to function, depriving children of their right to a normal childhood. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is not a natural disaster. It is a man-made catastrophe, the result of political decisions that have had devastating consequences for ordinary people. The international community has a moral obligation to pressure all parties to end the blockade and alleviate the suffering of Gazans. The recent escalation of violence in Gaza has resulted in a tragic loss of life and widespread suffering. Israeli airstrikes, often targeting densely populated areas, have killed and injured countless civilians, including women and children. The indiscriminate nature of these attacks has drawn international condemnation, with human rights groups accusing Israel of war crimes. Palestinian militants, for their part, have launched rockets into Israel, causing fear and disruption, but resulting in far fewer casualties due to Israel's sophisticated Iron Dome defense system. While both sides have a right to defend themselves, the use of disproportionate force and the targeting of civilians are unacceptable under international law. Behind each casualty statistic lies a human tragedy, a shattered family, and a community forever scarred by loss. The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable, and the cycle of violence only perpetuates the suffering. A ceasefire is urgently needed to prevent further bloodshed. The violence in Gaza has forced thousands of Palestinians to flee their homes, seeking refuge in UN-run schools and shelters. These overcrowded and undersupplied facilities are struggling to cope with the influx of internally displaced persons, many of whom have lost everything. The trauma of displacement, particularly for children, is profound and long-lasting, adding another layer of suffering to an already dire situation. The repeated displacement of Palestinians is a recurring theme in this conflict, a painful reminder of the 1948 exodus that continues to resonate today. The loss of home, land, and livelihoods has a devastating impact on individuals, families, and communities, tearing apart the social fabric and fueling a sense of despair. The international community must provide urgent humanitarian assistance to those displaced by the fighting and work towards a political solution that addresses the root causes of this conflict, including the issue of Palestinian refugees' right of return. Section 5. International condemnation, legal and moral pressure mounts. Israel's actions in Gaza have drawn widespread international condemnation, with human rights groups accusing the government of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The International Criminal Court, or ICC, is currently investigating allegations of war crimes committed by both sides, a move that has been met with resistance from Israel. The United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire and an independent investigation into the violence. Several countries have imposed sanctions on Israel, while others have called for an arms embargo. The international community is increasingly united in its condemnation of Israel's actions, but more concrete steps are needed to hold those responsible accountable and prevent further atrocities. The pressure on Israel to end the occupation and engage in meaningful peace negotiations is growing. The international community must leverage its economic and political influence to bring about a just and lasting solution to this conflict. Section 6. Voices of Dissent, Global Outrage and Calls for Justice. Across the globe, people of conscience are raising their voices in solidarity with the Palestinian people. From street protests to social media campaigns, a global movement is demanding an end to the violence, an end to the occupation, and an end to the injustice that has defined this conflict for far too long. Students, activists, artists, and ordinary citizens are mobilizing, demanding that their governments take concrete action to hold Israel accountable for its actions. This wave of global outrage is a testament to the power of human empathy and the growing awareness of the Palestinian plight. The world is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to the suffering in Gaza, and the demand for justice is reverberating loud and clear. The international community must listen to these voices of dissent and translate them into concrete action. The time for empty rhetoric and symbolic gestures is over. The time for meaningful change is now. Section 7. Shifting sands of opinion, the American public weighs in. Even in the United States, long a staunch ally of Israel, public opinion is beginning to shift. Recent polls indicate growing support for the Palestinian cause, particularly among younger Americans. This shift in sentiment is driven in part by increased media coverage of the conflict and the growing influence of social media, which has provided a platform for Palestinian voices to be heard. The American public is increasingly questioning the unconditional support that their government has provided to Israel for decades. There is a growing recognition that a just and lasting peace requires holding both sides accountable and addressing the legitimate grievances of both Israelis and Palestinians. This evolving public opinion creates an opportunity for a more balanced and nuanced approach to the conflict from the U.S. government. The Biden administration must seize this moment to push for a two-state solution based on international law and respect for human rights. Section 8. Leadership in Crisis, Palestinian Authority and the Vatican's plea. Palestinian leadership, though facing internal divisions and facing criticism for its own shortcomings, continues to advocate for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has called for international intervention and a return to negotiations. Meanwhile, Pope Francis, a vocal advocate for peace and justice, has condemned the violence in Gaza and called for an end to the suffering of the Palestinian people. The Pope's moral authority and his unwavering commitment to peace have resonated deeply with people of all faiths, amplifying the global call for a just resolution. The voices of Palestinian leaders and moral figures like Pope Francis remind us that even in the darkest of times, hope for peace must not be extinguished. The international community must support their efforts and work towards a future where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security. Section 9. Seeking a path forward towards a just and lasting peace. The path to peace in Israel-Palestine is fraught with obstacles, but it is a path that must be pursued with unwavering determination. The current crisis in Gaza is a stark reminder of the urgent need for a just and lasting solution to this decades-long conflict. A two-state solution, based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of a viable and independent Palestinian state, remains the only viable option for achieving a durable peace. This will require both sides to make difficult compromises and to abandon maximalist positions. Israel must end its occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, dismantle its settlements, and recognize the right of Palestinian refugees to return. The Palestinians, in turn, must renounce violence and recognize Israel's right to exist in peace and security. The international community has a crucial role to play in facilitating a peaceful resolution. This includes providing economic and political support to both sides, ensuring that any peace agreement is implemented fairly, and holding all parties accountable for their actions. The time for inaction and indifference is over. The time for peace is now.